So I needed a new high capacity performance drive for my PC. It's going to be used as a single drive, not going to be used in RAID. So I had a quick look. What's my best bet for performance for my creativity type of use on my PC? Getting best bang for buck. But I did want a 12 terabyte drive. They do go up to 14 terabytes at the moment. Well, most noticeably at the moment, the Toshiba. But for reasons I'll get to, that wasn't an option. So it was a little bit confusing for me at first, trying to get back into where hard drives are at the moment. And I wanted to just go through my thoughts. It may be helpful to somebody else going through exactly the same dilemma. What 12 terabyte hard drive to get at the moment? Obviously, in 6 months' time, this video is going to be completely out of date as they move on again. But just at this point, if you are using, whether it's in a RAID or if it's going to be as a single drive, I'll give you my thoughts on both. I will tell you, I ended up with the 12 terabyte Western Digital Gold, described as a data center drive, but it turned out to be my best option. Now, I will say, I did already have a 10 terabyte Seagate Barracuda Pro. Seagate always makes me nervous because I've had by far my highest failure rate with Seagate drives. I must have had about a dozen, well, I must have had about 7 or 8 drives fail just outside the warranty period. Almost to the day. It was really uncanny. So Seagate really made me nervous. However, when I bought this one, it was still the best option in terms of bang for buck. But I was nervous to get a second one. So I looked into things a bit closer. And I'll tell you why I've ended up with the Western Digital Gold. So first off, I've always bought Western Digital Black for my performance hard drives, mechanical hard drives. Obviously, no contest against an SSD. But this is about storage, high capacity. So this is really about mechanical hard drives. So in terms of performance for Western Digital, which I've personally always found the most reliable, so I'm always happiest buying a Western Digital hard drive. Having had many failures, I do prefer a 5-year warranty. Looking now at where Western Digital are, and of course, Western Digital have bought out Hitachi, so Western Digital are also Hitachi. The blacks only go up to 6 terabyte, whereas so the gold go up to 12 terabytes. It looks like black have been left behind, and if you're after either a data center drive or a performance hard drive for your desktop, whether it's in RAID or whether it's as a single drive, in terms of high capacity, it's only the gold now. So does that mean that still, if you can get away with a 6 terabyte drive, is the 6 terabyte black going to outperform a 12 terabyte gold in sheer performance terms? So first of all, what makes a data center drive? The main differences between a data center drive and a desktop drive are, it's going to be used in a RAID array. That means it needs to have time limited error correction, as Western Digital call it, TLER. Seagate call it error recovery control. Samsung call it command completion time limit. It's all the same thing. It's when the hard drive finds bad data. It's when a hard drive enters a deep recovery cycle to recover or attempt to recover bad data. And that's the important thing, to attempt to. Now, a RAID will drop a hard drive if it's out of action for 8 or more seconds. So these time limits on these data center drives mean it will go into deep recovery for a maximum of 7 seconds. So it won't be dropped from the RAID. Whereas a desktop drive historically will go on for about 30 seconds, but it could be a couple of minutes, normally 30 seconds. I say historically because clearly there's a blurring of the lines now with these high capacity drives between what would really be only for a NAS or a data center, or what would be high performance, best throughput on your desktop, best use creativity. So now you're getting high capacity, high performance drives where they're manufactured to be used in both in a data center and on your PC. And Western Digital openly state it works fine with TLER on your desktop. Previously, people were disabling that function, and Western Digital say not to do that anymore. So whereas historically, unless you was using a RAID, you wouldn't normally have used time-limited error recovery, is no longer a bad deal. So it's an ongoing debate, it seems, whether it really is a negative to have time-limited error recovery for a hard drive that's only being used as a single drive and not in a RAID in a desktop environment, personally, I've never found it a problem. Data center drives and NAS drives are made for 24/7 use. They will generally have longer warranties, higher mean time before failure rates, higher workload rates, higher load unload cycles. But probably the biggest deal of all, the firmware is going to be oriented, geared towards a data center NAS environment for RAID, whereas they're more optimized for creativity, for the stuff you do on your desktop when not described as a data center or NAS drive. So in terms of purely Western Digital Gold versus Western Digital Black, does one outperform the other, apart from the differences between a data center drive and a desktop drive? So as I already said, the Western Digital Black maxed out at 6 terabytes anyway. So it wasn't an option for me. However, it may be an option for you. In all the areas you would measure performance, the Gold is the better drive. For instance, the Black tops out with 128 megabyte cache. The Western Digital Gold has a 256 megabyte cache. I'm talking about, of course, the 12 terabyte. Non-recoverable read errors are rated at 10 times better on the Western Digital Gold versus the Western Digital Black. Official throughput rating, 255 megabytes per second on the Gold, 227 megabytes per second, Western Digital's own official figures for the Black. The Black, of course, is filled with air, and these new high capacity drives are filled with helium, because helium is lighter than air. There's less friction. There's all sorts of benefits. Not least, it allows for high capacity. I read that it's possible, it's highly likely, failure rates are going to be lower on helium drives. However, we haven't had them long enough to really say that one way or the other, but it does appear the failure rates are lower. In terms of noise, they're the same when they're rated at the same 36 decibels when they are in heavy workload. But at idle, the helium drive 20 decibels versus 29 decibels for the Black. So there's the big difference. At actual rest, the helium drives are a lot quieter. They do both have a 5-year warranty, which is an absolute must for me. And I do have a 6 terabyte Western Digital Black, and I did my own benchmarks, and I did get higher throughput, both read and write, on my Gold. The strong point of the Gold is the 4K write, which is nearly double the Western Digital Black. The read, slightly worse, but I mean, that's really negligible, really. Although technically about 50%. But overall, you can see the 4K with 64 threads. Again, the write is way better. But the big kick for me, the access times. The write access times, 1.7 seconds versus 9.9 seconds for the Western Digital Black. You know, access time, i.e. latency, massively better when it comes to writes. Although a teeny bit worse on the read. So maybe it works out cheaper per terabyte on the Western Digital Black, because I'm struggling to find an area where it's going to outperform the Gold. So at the time of my video, the general retail price for the Black, $239, the Gold $410, which means price per terabyte for the Black, £39.80, Gold £34.10. So even on bang for buck, you're getting more value out of the Western Digital Gold. So there isn't a single element where you could really say, well, the Western Digital Black is my drive, other than it's actually, you know, it's actually cheaper because it's off the capacity and you don't want to lay out for the 12 terabyte drive. Bear in mind, as you go down in the capacities, the performance will fall off a bit in the Gold. So it's going to be a little bit different if you was actually measuring 6 terabytes against 6 terabytes. However, in sheer bang for buck performance terms, and really this is about what was best for me, and I wanted the 12 terabytes, you're losing nothing in any area against the Western Digital Black. Whereas you would think, oh, it says data center, that says PC drive, that must be the best one for me. You know, for single drive use, well, no, there isn't a single element, not even noise. The one thing people do seem to be saying about the Gold as a drawback is noisy. Now, there must be a lot of people obviously coming to computers now that weren't around 20 years ago when mechanical drives were the only drives you could have, and they were all noisy. So, and I have to say, it's nothing like one of the old drives where you listen to the noise from this, but it's a mechanical drive and it does have a particular ticking, slightly grinding noise. Is it loud? No. Can you hear it? Yes. Not an issue for me. If you want an absolutely silent PC and you're in an absolutely silent environment, it may be a little bit annoying, but it's really, 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 really not a big deal. It's nothing like old drives and the noise you'd get from them, but you do get clicking if you're not used to that. It may be noisy, but if if I'm a few feet from it, I can't hear it at all. I've got to put my ear to it. But there is an obvious ticking noise, I will say, but it's not a bad noise. It's a normal hard drive noise, but obviously if you're not used to that, it may be a little bit shocking, but it really, really, really isn't. And this is a little clip of what it sounds like in my computer. This is my normal speaking voice. So basically, gold is the new black. No reason to get a black if you can afford extra for the high capacity gold. So the other major option out there is the Seagate. Seagate is even more confusing than Western Digital because they have the Barracuda Pro, the Ironwolf Pro. The differences between those hard drives: Barracuda aimed at the desktop and creativity, the Ironwolf aimed at data center and NAS environment. So in terms of Barracuda versus Barracuda Pro, the Pro comes with a 5-year warranty. You can get a 12 terabyte capacity. The non-Pro, 2-year warranty. A 2-year warranty I'm never going to do ever again with Seagate. Anyway, it's a 2-year warranty and they top out at 8 terabytes anyway. So for me, it wasn't an issue. I was looking for the highest capacity of a 12 terabyte. But anyway, I would always get the 5-year warranty over a 2-year warranty, and the Pro line does seem to have more performance than the equivalent non-Pro. So Barracuda Pro over time for me over Barracuda. Ironwolf versus Ironwolf Pro. So again, these are the NAS data center drives. Pro versus non-Pro. 5-year warranty versus a 3-year warranty on the non-Pro. Rated at 180 terabyte data writes per year for the non-Pro, 300 terabytes data writes for the Pro version. Meantime before failure, a little bit better on the Pro at 1.2 million hours versus 1 million hours. Non-recoverable read errors per bits read, 10 times better again for the Pro than the non-Pro. And even sheer official throughput, 250 megabytes per second Pro, 210 megabytes per second non-Pro, both on the 12 terabyte. So even in sheer performance terms, Ironwolf Pro wins out against the Ironwolf. And it's interesting because they all seem to be, depending where you buy, around the same price. So it makes no sense to me to get a non-Pro Ironwolf over a Pro Ironwolf. So narrowing down the choices for me, it's a Barracuda Pro, an Ironwolf Pro, or it's the gold. I mean, well, I've already said I got the gold, but the choices and options I went through narrowed it down to those three. So then the choice is, so the Barracuda Pro, and I've previously gone for the Barracuda Pro, the desktop single drive, and I'm using them as single drives, the firmware creativity oriented, optimized for use on the PC. That was what I went through previously, just to give you the official specs between the Ironwolf Pro and the Barracuda Pro. When making that choice, if you're going to use them in RAID, you're going to go for the Ironwolf Pro. If it's a single drive, then you've got a decision to make. So they both go up to 12 terabytes. They're both rated at 300 terabyte workload, 5-year warranty on both those drives, both rated for 250 megabytes per second throughput. But again, because the Ironwolf Pro is designed for data centers, you get rotational vibration sensors. The Ironwolf Pro is designed for 24/7 use, where that's not officially the case for the Barracuda Pro. However, I have my drives running all 24/7, and I did go for the Barracuda Pro last time, based on it being designed for use in the desktop in terms of firmware. Again, for me, the Barracuda Pro wins as the option because it's focused for single drive use. So my final choice was the Western Digital Gold or the Barracuda Pro. So in terms of those two, that's a 10 terabyte, but I was thinking about the 12 terabyte. First of all, I was nervous to have two Seagate drives, high capacity, in my computer. So that was one basis on which I wanted to even up the bets by going to Western Digital for this drive. However, on the other criteria, they both have 5-year warranties, tick. Same rating for non-recoverable error reads per bits read. Both basically are rated at the same throughput, 255 megabytes per second for the Gold, officially 250 megabytes per second for the Barracuda Pro. Now, one interesting difference was maximum power requirement. Now, in actual heavy workload use, 7 watts for the Gold, 7.8 Barracuda Pro. So on that, you'd say, oh, well, it's going to be teeny bit cheaper to run the Western Digital Gold. Now, obviously, if you're in a data center, that's going to add up to a lot if you've got thousands of hard drives. However, at idle, the Gold is 5 watts and the Pro is 4.8. So if they're not in use, so more likely desktop use, as in the Barracuda Pro, then it's a little bit cheaper to run the Barracuda Pro. But it is a little bit, 0.2 of a watt. So load, unload cycles, which is when it spins down, spins up. Obviously, it's mechanical, it's reading the head. So in terms of how many times it's rated to spin down, spin up, big difference. 600,000 for the Gold, 300,000 for the Barracuda Pro. Workload, 550 terabytes per year Gold, 300 terabytes per year for the Barracuda Pro. So you can see, in terms of sheer reliability, it's edging towards heavily the Gold. Besides the fact that I did want to split between Western Digital and Seagate. Seagate do make me nervous. Now, that's just my experience. Other people will say, oh, well, they've had loads of Western Digital fail, and Seagate have been good for them. I can only go by my own personal experience. To say handling, the Barracuda Pro, albeit this is the 10 terabyte, feels heavier. Actually, that's 640 grams and that's 635 grams. I'm not sure if how heavy the 12 terabytes is, but I'm sure it's a tiny bit more. However, it feels a little bit different. This feels thinner to the hand. The Barracuda Pro feels thicker. So I can't really explain that because they're about the same size. However, there's more metal casing going around it, so I suppose that gives it the feel. But it just feels a thinner drive, but the weight's almost identical between the Gold and the Barracuda Pro. That's my 10 terabyte. And again, I assume it's a slightly heavier drive for the 12 terabyte. So I clearly got the 10 terabyte and the 12 terabyte. So my benchmarks for these two drives, again, I've got to say, is the 10 terabyte and the 12 terabyte Barracuda Pro is rated to have more performance. But clearly, between my two of these drives, the Gold again is a clear winner. And again, its real strong point are those 4K writes and indeed the access time, and the very things that in real world use are going to make the difference. So even though that is desktop oriented and that's supposed to be data center oriented, even for me in my use, the Gold is the clear winner. So yeah, that's just, I hope someone found that useful before all this information goes out of date. Just to say, that was what I went through in my thinking for my new high capacity hard drive, and not wanting to lose out in terms of performance. That was the thinking, and just getting straight the differences between these drives, which are all priced around the same price mark, which makes it even more difficult to quite understand why, when certainly in terms of the pros and the non-pros, but the Seagate doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense. Now, historically, again, the other major difference would be more terabytes means more pounds per terabyte. It would cost, each extra terabyte costs you more money. However, that's not the case anymore. And just to point out, you can get 14, I was talking about 12 terabytes, you can get the Toshiba 14 drives. There are other 14 terabytes about to hit the market. In fact, Western Digital had one of their, under the, I think the Hitachi brand, but it's Western Digital, have a 14 drive out. For months it's been talked about. It's still not hit the stores as far as I can see. So just to point out again, This is single drive use. Now, you personally may well be using them in RAID, and of course you would swap out the Barracuda Pro and stick in the Ironwolf Pro, and there would be hardly any difference. It seems to be identical performance and reliability benchmarks between the Barracuda Pro and the Ironwolf Pro, and it seems the only real difference is one has firmware oriented towards the RAID use and one is towards pure creativity and single drive use. So I think it's exactly the same thoughts you'd go through if you're using them in RAID. The Western Digital would still win out in sheer performance terms. It's just that if you're going to use them in RAID, it wouldn't be between the Western Digital Gold and the Barracuda Pro. It would be between the Western Digital Gold and the Ironwolf Pro. So those are the two drives for me to think about if you're using them as RAID in a desktop environment. And you was thinking, well, they're for data centers and NAS, so I'm not going to get the performance I want. Yes, you will still get the performance out of them. So I hope you got something out of this video before it all goes out of date, which they do very, very quickly with hard drives. And thank you for watching.
UK